Yes. Is that where the problem is, Prof, from an experience perspective? And for instance, were your input as a key stakeholder or those of private university heads like the one that you do considered, or even do they reflect? Are they reflective in the report that was handed over to the president yesterday? And is the problem the ministry?
Yes, thank you very much, Abdikadir, for that question. I want to say that in terms of representation, yes, private universities are represented in the task force. We have, I think, the deputy chair of the task force, who is a vice chancellor of Catholic University of East Africa. So the representation is there. As to whether it is adequate, that's another matter. But I'm aware that we are represented. Now, the issues that have been raised by the task force are critical issues that need to be looked at. But I agree with the debate from my colleagues here in terms of whether they're the real issues that are facing the education sector, and whether the way they have been recommended is the same way that they need to be addressed. Because there was an attempt to get views from the stakeholders. Was the time adequate? Were all the views collected? Mm-hmm. I think those are the kind of questions that we need to ask and try to get answers to. In terms of private universities, there are recommendations there which perhaps could have been done differently. Yeah. For example, the issue of the private universities' stake, in the whole education system, is is being looked at like the private universities are teaching children of a lesser God.
Yes,
if I may use that terminology.
Close them basically.
Yes, yeah. They're teaching children of a lesser God, and yet in our education system, it is the learner who chooses where to go. So the learner, once he chooses to go to private universities, then the government should actually be able to support that child or that student when it goes to the private universities, because that is the choice of the child. But to introduce some sort of discriminatory measure and say that the students who go to private universities are not going to be funded by the government, I think that is discriminatory. Yeah, which we should address. Then the other issue is the entire, these reforms are kind of too frequent, and I'm glad to repeat that there were Fatuba Chege, recommendations. There was the earlier recommendations.
Professor Hiro.
Professor Hiro. So why are we doing all this every now and then? If you look at the other jurisdictions, you look at the other countries that we can borrow from, the education systems are very stable. Once a particular evaluation is done, that runs for a number of years. And you can only, solve individual problems within that system. But you don't overhaul the entire education system. Overhauling that actually is very expensive, and two, it now redirects the attention from the good intentions that the education is supposed to give, to something else. So we need to look at, for example, looking at the CBC system of education, which is being introduced now. I agree there have been weaknesses in the 844 system of education, but was the total overhaul the real solution to addressing those problems of 844? And debates are there as to whether this was the time to replace 844 with the CBC, and whether CBC is really going to solve the problems. Actually, there have been debates that say that CBC is kind of not really going to solve the problems that 844 had. So there needs to be a lot of consideration in this. The presidential working party's recommendations, as I said earlier, It has come out with a book of over 200 pages. A book of over 200 pages. By the time you finish reading the first page and the end, you have forgotten what was in the first.
That's before the appendices. Huh?
Exactly.
Would it have more simpler?
Yeah. A very, very simpler, structured, and summarized, recommendations, which we can look at as, for example, universities and say, yes, this is our role, this is what we need to do.
Okay.
And then that would be, good for us.
Okay, Dr. Galgalo, Ari, you had a point. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you very much. One, I just want to correct my brother